This week's episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast is proudly brought to you by Cornerstone Gundog Academy. CGA is the world's most comprehensive online gun dog training resource with over 160 instructional videos, including everything you need to take a 7-week-old puppy to a finished gun dog. Visit cornerstonegundogacademy.com to sign up for their free preview module and begin your training journey today. Cornerstone Gundog Academy, the most advanced gun dog training resource on the web. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 93. This week on the show, we're talking goose calling with Mr. Bad Grammar himself, Scott Threinen of Molt Gear. All right, welcome to the 93rd episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We're your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. I'm your host, Josh Palm. Check us out at hpoutdoors.com. If you're just new to the show, you can catch all of the past episodes on your favorite podcast catcher, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Store, anywhere that good quality podcast content can be found. You can also head over to our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Get all the great content there. Join our Facebook group. Engage in discussion with a bunch of the listeners of the show. And also with my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
Not too much. Ready for the summer to be over, my friend.
Yeah, me too. Before we get too far into the discussion about summer being over and the season approaching, I want to take just a minute to thank Gunner Kennels, engineered for your dog, designed for travel, and built for your peace of mind. The G1 Kennel has set the new industry standard and put Gunner Kennels in a category it's all its own. Gunner Kennels was started to protect your pet, and it continues to be at the center of everything that they do. Gunner is dedicated to building the best and safest pet travel crate on the market. Man's best friends deserves man's best kennel. Check out their G1 series of kennels and accessories at gunnerkennels.com. Also like to thank Adrenaline. Bird hunting made quick, clean, and humane. The finisher is the alternative to the out-of-date technique that can damage or destroy your trophy bird. The finisher has been tested in the field and continues to hold true to its name. The finisher can easily be worn on your lanyard, vest, or jacket. Check it out at adrenaline.com to get yours today. Also want to thank Camp Chef, Black Rifle Coffee Company, and Southern Oak Kennels for their support of this show. If you head over to our website and check out the discounts page, you can find out how to save yourself some cash at Dunn Sporting Goods, Black Rifle Coffee Company, White Rock Decoys, and on a custom HP duck or goose call with 737 call. So head over there, save yourself some cash. Check out those. Check out the hats we got for sale in the store. Get yourself some HP swag, and yeah, thank you to the companies who support the show. Support them if you can. All right, Dan, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm fired up about this interview with Scott Threinen. Bad Grammar was a big influence on me as a caller and a hunter, and we get into it with him on the interview on some of those things, but yeah, man, I'm excited for this one. I think people are really going to enjoy this.
I'm feeding off your excitement, and it's funny because if we I think go back a couple years, usually you're not super pumped about early season goose, but I feel a different vibe from you right now.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes early season goose can be hard for me just because of life going on and all that stuff. But I don't know. Yeah, this year feels a little bit different. And I think too, just, I'm feeling a lot of excitement just over the growth of the group and all of the stuff. And, looking forward to talking to Scott. I think he's just a wealth of knowledge. I mean, Bad Grammar, the DVD and so it was just a different tool for me than the other instructional series that were out there. When I was learning to goose call, and I think without question a better goose call for having watched it and having trained with it. So I know a lot of guys recommend it to others who are looking to, further their calling abilities, and I'm certainly one of them. And we get to have he's got a cool announcement coming up. A lot of good stuff coming from the Bad Grammar series, and we'll get into that as well in the interview with Scott. So I'm looking forward to that. Anything else you wanted to hit here before we bring Scott in and cover the interview?
No, man. Like you said, it was a energetic episode, discussion, and just his passion that it flows out of him, and it's really fun talking to him. And I think we can let the cat out of the bag that he will be a return guest for us, and we have a few plans for that. So, excited for the convo, and it's a good one. So buckle up.
Yep, super fired up. So let's just get right to it, and we're excited to welcome Scott Threinen to the show. All right, joining us this week is a guest that we're super excited to have, and a guy that we've got a ton of questions for, and I think is going to be able to provide some information that our listenership is going to find incredibly useful and insightful. It's Scott Threinen, Molt Gear, Bad Grammar. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It should be fun. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so are we, man. I mean, it's funny when our Facebook listeners group, someone comes in and has a question about learning to call and trying to get started, or even sometimes some advanced questions. Bad grammar is one of those things that has just become a staple response for so many people. And I can tell you that, for myself and for Dan, we both, learned a lot about what we know about calling from the Bad Grammar, CD and DVD. And it's just such an incredible resource to have out there for the waterfowl community. Talk a little bit about, before we get into like the techniques and stuff that we want to dive into, share with us a little bit about the Bad Grammar experience. And when you were cutting that back then, did you have any idea that it would become just such a relied on tool by so many waterfowlers across the community?
No. The easy answer to that is no, I did not. The funny thing is I probably learned just as much making Bad Grammar as the feedback we get on it today. When we, in 2006 is when we came out with Bad Grammar, the CD. So I would say it probably all started in 2005. We have a local lake here in town, Silver Lake, where they rediscovered the giants back in 1962. So there's a lot of rich goose hunting history in the area, and we have a lot of local geese, and then obviously migratory geese that come in. So there's always geese around. We can always listen to them, see them, watch them. They're everywhere in town. And so when the project or the thought of making an instructional tool came up, it was kind of what would be the best way to present it, a learning tool to people. And I guess the simplest answer was the goose. It was, where can you learn anything better from than the actual animal species that you're trying to mimic than the goose. So it was a simple combination of, hey, let's give the audience or the consumer the goose. And while that was happening in the 30 hours of recorded audio, I probably picked up and learned just as much from it as the guys that purchased it after it was finished too. So it was a really cool experience. Not only getting years of feedback, geez, what is that? That's 12 years ago now. We're getting close to 13 years ago. But it was also a pretty cool experience for myself. Just getting invested into the sounds and the body language and that these geese present on other geese when they're communicating and stuff. And so I really learned as much from it, probably as the consumer did too. And I thought it was beneficial for me too. So it was an awesome project today.
Yeah, they say if you really want to learn something, then teach it to other people, and that's kind of an extreme. But going back, so that was 2005. You started doing that. You're a 3-time World Live Goose champ, World Team Goose Championship, multiple major calling championships. When, what years did all of your competition calling start, and where were you, in that line when you started the DVD and CD series?
Yeah, so I always grew up hunting. Started guiding at an early age, but didn't start competition goose calling until 2002. My first contest was the Burlington Mississippi Valley Calling Classic in 2002. Had a really good showing there. Won the state contest in Minnesota that summer. Won another contest, and then took second in the world that fall too. So that kind of propelled everything. That was kind of a big year as far as contest calling goes. And then in 2006, at the Easton, Maryland, actually in 2005 in Easton, Maryland, at the World Goose Calling Championship out at the Waterfall Festival, in 2005 they started the live duck contest. And it went over so well that the following year in 2006, they started the live goose calling contest. And I think with starting Bad Grammar in 2005 and presenting that and being around geese that much and listening to their sounds and their sequences, that really kind of propelled the championships of 2007, 2008, 2009 in the live goose. So, I started open calling contests, in 2002 and had some decent success in those, and then the live goose kind of in 2007, 2008, 2009. But I think, the when it circles around, when you look at 2007, 2008, 2009, it was probably a result of making the Bad Grammar, because we came out with Bad Grammar, the DVD, in 2008. So kind of the contest calling thing led into Bad Grammar, and then Bad Grammar kind of led into more contests. And so that's how it all kind of moved along at that time.
That's pretty awesome. I had just one quick question. I know we usually go back and forth, but when I'm really green on the competition calling scene. So when you do all that traveling, do you get sponsored by companies? Like, is your travel paid for? Are you paying out of your own pocket to, travel down to Mississippi or over to Maryland, stuff like that?
No, it's all out of your own pocket. Yeah, contest calling is it's funny. It's like a 17 to 25-year-old game, and it's when you have the most time to practice and the most energy, and you kind of think that, hey, maybe if I win all these contests, I can, do something with that and blah, blah, blah. And it's also the time probably in your life when you have the least amount of money. So, you're traveling around and you're staying with buddies, there's 4 or 5 guys in a hotel room, you're carpooling, it's, up late at night telling stories, having a few beverages and all that stuff. And, so it's definitely, you pay your own way, and then you hope you're winning. It's really funny to be won at it. I think the World Goose is, $7,500 or $10,000. For first, Rogers coming up next weekend, I think it's $10,000. So you can definitely, make some money at it if you consistently finish high. But yeah, it's definitely one where it's you pay your own way.
I'm sitting here listening to you talk about, the 2005 and 2006 time frames. And, I'm 35 years old. I graduated in college in 2005. And I think about now, of course, like I said, I've got the Bad Grammar DVDs, so I've watched it and I've heard you talk to this a little bit, but I'm going to ask you a question that I already know the answer to, unfortunately, but the reason why I'm going to ask it is because I'm curious is when you tell me the answer to this question and you're at a show and you've got someone that's like 20 or 18 or 19 years old, kind of getting into that prime calling time of their career, when I ask you about who the people that influenced you and who are your mentors in the game and kind of like helped you get to where you were and taught you the things that and helped you refine your skill set, when you throw those kinds of names around, do the younger generation know who those people are, and do they make the connection to names like like Tim Grounds and Kelly Powers and stuff like that? I mean, is there a connection still at that point? Because for me, that was kind of like my prime, right? I mean, that's when I was in that period.
That was your wheelhouse. Yeah,
right. I was like, oh
sure.
man, like I tell you, Kelly Powers was the second interview we ever did on this podcast. And Dan and I were like freaking starstruck to like even get the dude on the phone. Like I can remember that. And I just wonder, I wonder now, like does an 18-year-old kid who's getting into, goose hunting, does he know who Kelly Powers is? I mean, of course now he's got his own calls and stuff. So like probably helps a little bit, but like, in general, as far as like just what those type of guys mean to the industry and like goose calling and the development of where we've come, do you think that they make that connection?
The simple answer to that is no, they do not. Back, and Kelly Powers is a great friend of mine, and we won the World Team Goose together and stuff. And back then, it was kind of that was also the start of the internet and the forums, and
right.
You would have to go to a show to see a lot of people. Now, it's a different wave of influencers, or a different wave of guys where. Their idol might be a Snapchat hero. Their idol might be a blogger, somebody that that communicates with them every day. So that's why you see a lot of companies. They're going to obviously social media. They're doing podcasts like this to reach out to that next generation because like any generation, it's 10, 15 years, and then the next wave comes in. Well, when you look at it, Kelly's a few years older than me, so he must be 38 or 39. Now I'm 36. So, when you look at a generation, 15 years, it's that 18, 19, 20-year-old. No, they don't know. They don't know those people. They're following some guy that, has made a name for himself on Snapchat or Instagram or blogging on YouTube or something like that. So, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different wave of how they're collecting their information and finding their resources, where back when we did it, you had to go to a show to see people. You had to, open up Wild Call magazine and read about it. You had to buy the DVD now, and now it's just a different interaction now. So, I think the simple answer to your question is probably not, no for most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you. It kind of makes me hurt a little bit inside to think that there's probably a generation of people out there that think, they only know Kelly Powers because his association with Power Calls, or they only know Tim Grounds because of Tim Grounds championship, goose calls or whatever. And I'm like, oh man,
Sure.
that it's just, maybe I'm showing my age a little bit here, but I think that, that does what you're saying, I think is really, good insight as to where the industry is going, but it does make me kind of feel
Sure.
a little bit of, allure for the way things used to be before all that other stuff.
I'm 36, so I'm right there with you. And, we travel around and do shows and stuff like that. And, yeah, we get the questions all the time. People will come up from the at seminars or whatever, and you kind of say a few things, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I might have heard of him." It's like, man, you really should, because he's a pretty important guy in the history of waterfalling. But it's also the same thing that when you tell somebody, 55 years ago, the Canada goose was almost extinct, and they're like, really?
Right.
There's, 150,000 nesting pairs in the state of Minnesota. You're telling me that, there's 12 of them 55 years ago. So it's, it's one thing where, it's just a sign of the times. It's how they gather their information now, and most of that is done through a social aspect on their phone, and and as a business owner, part of my job is I guess to realize that and try to communicate and get in front of them as well. So.
Yeah, I think the social media definitely cuts down the miles that people are traveling to shows and whatnot. You hear about how it's kind of slowing down everywhere. But I tell you what, you and Kelly Powers, that is probably one of the strongest team goose calling pairs that has ever been put together when you think about it. But I have, like Josh said, we talked to Kelly, a long time ago, and he was one of the first guys on our show. But the amount of time that he put into his calling, and I know the amount of time that you put into your calling, and really just being just a master of the craft. When you see, and this is just a social media call, when you when you see those memes going around that say, I'm not a contest caller because I don't have to call, or I shoot my judges or something like that, does that just make you laugh pretty hard, or how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it can kind of go two ways. There's a lot of kids that get into calling because it's very interesting to them. It's kind of like a musical instrument, but they're not in the band or the choir. They can do it at home by themselves, and necessarily they don't hunt a lot. There's a lot of people that do get into contest calling before they really start getting into hunting. Personally, myself, I started hunting probably, I said going out on my own, and then started hunting probably close to 8 or 9 years before I started to get into contest calling. So, when people say, they shoot their judges, I guess you would say, I don't take that one way or the other. Contest calling takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. And those are two things that most guys won't invest in. One, they don't have the time, even though they may. They don't have the time. And then two, the amount of practice it takes. And, just kind of the attitude to get up on stage in front of a bunch of people and call too. Sometimes people have a hard time calling out in the pit when there's another good caller around or out in the blind. Mm-hmm. Take that and elevate it to a contest stage. A lot of people have difficulty even getting up there. A lot of great goose callers that I've heard will never call in a contest just because they're kind of crowd shy or something like that. So, when somebody says, I shoot my judges or, I'm good enough to call, out the field or something, I guess I don't, look into that too much, or think about it too much. Contest calling isn't for everybody. It takes a lot of ability, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of nerve to step up there in front of everybody. And when you start to weed out those 4 characteristics, that's going to weed out a lot of people right there that have those 4 things to do it. So, it is what it is when I guess I say that. I don't really have too much of a negative or a positive on people that say that, I guess.
Yeah, I use this analogy with Kelly, and you touched on the instrument, made me think of it. I'm not a contest caller either, but mm-hmm. I look at the way that guys can control and manipulate a call that do it on the contest stage, and I'm envious of that because I would love to have that ability to use at my disposal in the blind. And
oh, sure.
When I talked with Kelly about it, I used the analogy, it's like we're playing a guitar. I can play Smoke on the Water because I know one chord. You can play Stairway to Heaven. You can play Stairway to Heaven because you know all the chords. And it's like, sure. I don't have the time or the ability to learn how to play Stairway to Heaven. So I'm going to focus on playing the best Smoke on the Water I can play and hope I can kill birds. So to that end, when you're talking to a guy who's getting started, or maybe he's been trying to get going, really struggling, and they're kind of, really at that initial ramp into it, because I feel like, if you're talking short reed goose calls, I think the very, very beginning is the most difficult. And then, at least this is my experience, the very, very beginning was the most difficult. And then when you start to challenge yourself with the more advanced notes, it becomes more difficult. At least that was my experience. So, a lot of guys grab the call. They don't know proper air presentation. They don't know this. They don't know that. And they get the kazoo sound and they immediately get defeated and they want to go back to their flute, or they just decide that they're not going to be a callers or whatever. So when you get a guy that comes up to you at a show and says, I'm lost, I can't figure it out, like, what are the common things that you can say to somebody that will help them get on the right track? Because like I mentioned, once I feel like you get those like very, very simple basics down, it kind of comes along pretty quickly, but like it sort of, you kind of stuck in the mud a little bit there until you get some of those core basics. And so what are some of your tips that you offer to people to kind of help them get going like that?
Oh, you know what? That's a great question, because that person that comes up and says they're stuck, they're lost, that was deep. I started off in in 1991 with a flute call, just kind of practicing on my own. And this was kind of the start of the short reed revolution, was just starting to take off in the early 90s. And I remember from 93, I got my first ever short reed goose call. So I had to switch over from what I learned, because even at a young age, I got what I felt was pretty efficient on a flute call. You add the air in, you use your hands a little bit, it breaks over, there's minimal sound you can make, that type of stuff. So when I switched over to a short reed goose call, it was a different world for me. And at that time, there was no internet. There was not a lot of instruction out there, especially for a 12-year-old kid that grew up on a dairy farm. Real sporting goods stores around, that had instructional stuff, maybe some tapes or something, but there was no visual. There was no real good audio. So basically, you're learning this stuff trial and error, and it was a lost period. I remember it took me probably 4 to 5 months solid in my garage every night to get the first sound that I felt represented the Canada goose. Probably 4 to 5 months. And so now when people come up and they say they're lost, they say they're, every which way, it's really the first thing, and like you pointed out, it comes down to fundamentals. The first 25% of the game is just proper fundamentals of holding the call right, call position up to the mouth, tongue position, presenting the air. Those 4 things, if you can get those 4 things done, and you could, if you have the right instruction, you can probably learn them in a day or two, as far as get your hands on there right, mouth position, tongue position, air presentation. You can take 25% of the game out right there. Then when it comes to learning the basic notes, those fundamentals are going to help you. And then, like you pointed out, is that at the end, when you get into the most advanced stuff, that's going to be a little bit of drag too. But if you have the proper fundamentals and the control over the call, that's where all those finesse sounds at the end come in. So when somebody's lost, it really, really points back to fundamentals. And this isn't for somebody that's just starting out either. We go to enough shows where guys that have been blowing a goose call for 10, 15 years will come up and say, hey, I just can't get any better on a goose call, or I'm still not doing things right. And you ask them to use the call for you. And really, it comes down to fundamentals even for them that have been doing it for so long. Usually 1 or 2 out of the 4 things in fundamentals are wrong. And you fix those, and they're on their way. So it really boils down to probably the fundamentals, just like anything, whether you play golf or you're in baseball or football or whatever the case may be. The day in and day out fundamental structure is what will carry you, to how good you want to get. Like I say, the 20 best goose callers I know all have the 20 best hands I've seen on a goose caller. Hands are so important and so forth. So, it boils down to fundamentals when somebody is really lost or, can't get any better. It comes down to those 4 things.
Yeah, there's no doubt that good fundamentals will definitely elevate your game and get you moving. And, to those guys that come up and they're just starting out, you teach them the fundamentals. What calls do they need to go and use for the first year going out hunting? What would you tell them to work on first and make sure they have down pat before they move forward?
That's another good question, because a lot of people, they'll come up and they want to learn how to do a spit note or a train or something that sounds, really pleasing or cool to the ear or different. But the substance of the meal is in the meat and the potato. It's in the cluck, it's in the moan, and it's in the honk. And the honk is a variation of both of those sounds. The front half the moan, the back half the cluck, it makes a honk. You break it down, the first one's a moan, the second one's a cluck. If you can do those 3 sounds, there's probably not a goose in this country that you can put in your decoy. Now, It's going to take a little speed. It's going to take a little rhythm, knowing when and how, sequences that forth. But really, those three sounds are what's going to carry you throughout the whole thing. And the honk, that's what everything is based around. It's a variation of it. The spit note, the train, those are just different moans and cries that geese make. The double cluck, it's two clucks stacked on top of each other. The hiccup, it's a moan, a stop, and a cluck in a sequence. So really, when you talk about what note does somebody have to learn, they got to learn the honk, they got to learn the moan, and they got to learn the cluck. Everything that a goose does in his vocabulary is based around that, and everything you do on a goose call is based around that. It's just a variation of one of the two. So those three sounds right there are the must-haves right away, because they're going to lead you into everything else, and they're the must-haves for hunting, because that's what you're going to use out in the field 99% of the time, is those three sounds out there as well.
I want to just touch on something really quickly as we're talking. I'm just thinking about the first time that I watched Bad Grammar, and I had my goose call in my hand. I'm going through it, as you're teaching it. And one of the things that struck me, and it was a fundamental thing that I thought was like, you take this to the bank. When you're blowing a short reed goose call, you do this. And then you brought your approach to it, and I was like completely floored. And that's the age old adage of, you take the tip of your tongue and you slam it in the back of your bottom teeth and you leave it there. A lot of guys teach that method, and that's all I'd ever heard before I'd seen Bad Grammar. And then you talk about using the tip of your tongue, and it was really a game changer for me for a lot of things that I was trying to build with. So for guys that haven't heard that or aren't aware of your philosophy with that, talk a little bit about how you teach that using the tip of the tongue versus always planting that behind the back of your bottom teeth.
Sure. Well, the funny thing about that is, the funny thing is when I made Bad Grammar, I had not watched any other instructional videos out there. I think there was a couple. I think probably Tim had one. Maybe Sean Stahl had one. There was a couple of them out there. And really, it wasn't me trying to teach a different way. It was me just trying to teach the way I did it. I didn't know there was a different way. I didn't know that people were keeping the tip of their tongue behind the front teeth on the bottom until Bad Grammar came out. And then it was just like you said, it was really a flood of questions that, hey, this is the way I've been taught, this is the way we've done it, and so on and so forth. And so first response to that is, I never even knew that was a way to do it, or guys were doing it that way. And I think where my philosophy or my teaching came from was really from the goose itself. When you watch geese, and I had a bunch of recordings, video recordings, when you see that goose do that honk or that, rapid cluck or spit note or something, they use the tip of their tongue to start and stop that note. When they open that mouth and that tip of that tongue comes up, and you can see that saliva shooting out after that when they drop that tongue down. And for me, that's what always made sense too, because when we talk, that tip of that tongue is on the roof of our mouth, and that's what's controlling each sound that we make. It's helping us pronounce the notes. It's gaining power to it. It's gaining clarity to it. If I took the tip of my tongue and I put it down on my, my bottom, behind my bottom teeth, I lose all the power, all the control, and all of the crispness in each sound that I'm trying to make in a goose call. So the tongue is like a release valve. It's going to start and stop each note. And, when we talk, tip of our tongue, you say that word "t," and that pretty much is an example of how you release the air into the call. And, that's my way of doing it, I guess. And I think a lot of the so to speak, after, talking to a bunch of people, a lot of the better goose callers also use that method too. And there might be a slight variation of an unsound where you don't use it as much, but, that speed, the control, and that power, I think a lot of guys do use the tip of their tongue. And I think it's also easier for guys as well. They know where an important part of the overall function of the goose call, the release valve, is supposed to be. They're not trying to figure it out. They're not trying to pin it here, trying to get their air sequences. Because one thing that when you pin that tip of your tongue down behind your front teeth, that allows the middle part of your tongue, the back part of your tongue to really fluctuate up and down. And when that air is coming up from your diaphragm and it's pressurized and it's moving into the call, your mouth cavity is an extension of that call too. So if you have something to wave that sound, cut it off, trap it, open it up, that's really going to hinder your control as far as each note is concerned into the call. So I think using the tip of their tongue clarified it for a lot of people, simplified it for a lot of people, and helped progress it for a lot of people too in their goose calling.
You talked about your tongue and how that's an extension of your mouth and how that's an extension of the call. But go ahead and talk about your hands, because that is a pretty important part as far as the back pressure is concerned. And some people, I'm sure that you tell them to grab a call and they're grabbing it like a baseball bat and they're not really sure what to do with it. So maybe just a few quick pointers on that.
Hands are extremely important, and I think my quote in Bad Grammar was, "You can have a $2 or you can have a $200 goose call and a $2 pair of hands, and you got a $2 goose call." Yeah. Hands are an extension of the goose call, and this is one where guys really have a hard time with. I think, one, because they don't know how important the hands are, and two, they don't take the time to really get it right because they don't think they're that important. The hands are an extension of that goose call. There's going to be people that teach just kind of, wrap your thumb and your pointer finger around the end and then just gently lay down your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky. And all that's doing is creating an extended chamber from that goose call. It's just lengthening that goose call. Anytime you lengthen the goose call, you're going to cut down on the capabilities of it. So you have a 4.5-inch short goose call, and they'll teach you that, just lay your hands down over it. So now you're extending that call to another 3.5 inches. So it's really taking away for the capabilities of the call, and it's also a little monotone. When a goose call is designed, you want that air to get in the call, make the sound, and get out of the call. Well, the hands are going to determine a little bit of your acoustic sound. They're going to determine a lot of your range and your power as well. And when I say range is so important because there's a lot of guys that can go a goose call really, really good, but if you listen really, really closely, it's very, very monotone. And what I mean by that is if you have a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10, okay, you want to be able to trap your hands down to get the quietest, muffledest, deepest 1, and open your hands up to get the highest frac, high-pitch, squeak 10. And if you're not moving your hands and have them in the right position, you're just going to sit in the middle between a 4 and a 6. And that's where a lot of guys is that they will use their diaphragm, their mouth cavity, and their air pressure to inflect the sound differently and not so much their hands. And when I'm judging the contest a lot, a guy can sound unbelievable, but he's going between the scale of 4 and 6. I want to hear the lowest low and the highest high. And it takes all factors. It takes your diaphragm, your tongue, your control, your power, you're backing away from the air, and you're also moving your hands at the same time. You're taking them down to that squeeze position, basically like you're almost trying to choke the call off to open them wide up and everything in between to get that 1 through 10 range. And that's what hands do. Can you get away with it and just, put your hands over the call and let the air flow out of the call freely? Sure, you can do that. But hands are going to help with back pressure. They're going to help you control the sound. They're also going to help with the range and help you manipulate the sound. And so hands are going to take, an average caller to a good caller to a great caller, and a poor caller to an average caller. hands are absolutely critical, and they're one of the 4 fundamentals that, besides airflow, the proper airflow into the call, hands and airflow are probably the 2 most important. And the thing about hands is that it should be pretty simple to get your hands on there, right? But it's not. You really have to practice it, and each time you have to pick up that goose call, you have to make sure your hands are on that goose call, right? Because you will start to learn then exactly how important they are, because by the slightest movement of them, they can change the whole complexity, the whole sound, the whole range, the whole flow of air out of the call, which allows you to make more and more and more notes, and especially those complicated notes that you talk about at the end out of a goose call. So hands are critical.
Quick follow-up, because, you said a $200 call and a $2 pair of hands is worth a $2 call. And might be one of the most asked questions that we get or come across our page when new guys are starting and really getting into it. But like, if I gave you the crappiest call in the world, you could make it sound great. But if I give it to, a new guy, it's going to sound like that crappy call that I gave him. So how much emphasis would you put on new guys getting a decent call or a good call to start out with? How much does that matter? Do you tell them, how serious are you about this, and how much, do you go into budget and all that, or do you say start on, a cheap polycarb and get the fundamentals down and then work from there?
It really is based on the individual, right? But here's the thing. With calling, it's your form of communication with the animal that you're hunting. It is vital. And I would say, calling, when I first started out, was an important aspect of the hunt. If you sounded like a goose, you were going to have success. But over the last 25 years, and I would say especially over the last 7 years, calling, I personally believe, is now the number one factor on any given hunt. I think it's more important than location. I think it's more important than your decoys. And a lot of times, it's more important than your concealment. There are a lot of really good average goose callers that hunt now. And that's going to help, and that's going to take calling very, very tough. You can't just kind of sound like a goose. Can you? Yeah, it's going to work once every 2 weeks. Anything you do in waterfowl hunting will work once every 2 weeks. You're going to get fresh birds, north wind, the weather's going to align, you're going to be underneath them or on the spot. Once every 2 weeks, you're going to go out and be successful. But day in and day out, I firmly believe calling is number one. And goose hunting is turning into so much of a traffic hunt now. Back in the day when it was easy to get on every farmer's land in the area, or you knew somebody and everybody was related to another guy, you could basically hunt the goose where he wanted to feed that day. Now, land is getting a little bit tougher to get on because there's not as many farmers. It's owned by, bigger farmers. You're either in or you're out. So guys are hunting traffic way more than they used to now. And when you hunt trafficking geese, calling is number one. You can make those geese do something that they don't want to do, or they're not going to do to an average goose caller or a guy that just sounds like a goose. So being efficient on a goose call is so important in today's waterfowl hunting, duck or goose call. So when somebody asks, you look at decoy. Okay, a dozen decoys is $400. A great goose call is $150. What is that? That's four or five decoys or whatever it is. I would rather have a great goose call and subtract 4 or 5 decoys than have a really bad goose call and add 3 decoys to my spread. So I think it's really important, because one thing that when you take a step down in goose calls and you get into those $20, $30 entry level calls, those calls aren't designed to do anything more than a guy should learn in 1 week of calling, if he has the proper fundamentals. They're not tuned up to really the tone, the manipulation in the sound, the range, so you're really going to be hampered. And if you get a teaching tool that teaches you and progresses you rapidly, you're probably going to grow out of that call in a week, in all honesty. So I think personally, a good goose call right off the bat is so important. It's something that you can have really forever. I mean, I think the reflex that I got on my lanyard right now is 5 years old and never been retuned. Still has the same reed in it, still has the same gut. So I think it's important based on everything else that's involved in waterfowl hunting, from decoys to ground blind to scouting, gas, truck, trailer, all that. I think the investment into a quality decoy, or a quality goose call, is very minimal compared to all the other things you're going to have to buy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a lot of guys they want to make the generalization that when you're hunting traffic, decoys are super important because you want to show numbers and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But the funny thing is, I bet you a lot of guys that, that would say that probably can't blow a goose call like you do. So they probably haven't seen, they're like the average callers, they're like me, I'm just an average caller. So like, I need everything that I need, I can get in out of the bag. So I could see where people would think that, but what you're saying, it makes sense, because anybody can throw out 10 dozen full bodies, but not everybody could run the call in a way that can make geese respond the way that, people that know what they're doing can. So absolutely think that makes sense. And I wanted to circle back really quickly to what you were talking about when with calling on the hands, because I think, again, this is just my perception. I don't know anything about anything, but I think a lot of guys don't actually know what they're doing with their hands and what they're trying to accomplish. So they see guys on YouTube videos and stuff moving their hands a lot and getting, the call to do great things. But like, I feel like a lot of guys, when they're blowing calls, they don't really know what they're trying to accomplish all the time by moving their hands. They're just doing it because that's what kind of seems natural, and they're sort of into the deal. And that kind of got me thinking a little bit more too. And Dan brought it up. We get questions all the time about what's a good starter goose call and what call should I get and all these kinds of things. And I know I'm asking you like 100 questions in one right now, so I apologize, but
okay.
Can you break it down a little bit for the guy who is just getting into it, looking to make a goose call, and maybe he's got like an acrylic call or I'm sorry, a poly call, and he's looking to buy his first acrylic or something like that, or maybe it's a guy fresh off the street, but there's a million calls to choose from out there now, a million styles, different things. Can you give us a quick rundown? Because I'm not sure everybody knows this. When you're looking at a call, how are they going to vary? What does it mean if a call's got a shorter mouthpiece? And what's it mean if the call's got a shorter barrel? And what's it mean if the call's got a longer mouthpiece and a longer barrel? And, what's broken guts do for you? And what about a shaved reed? Like, what does that mean to a guy that doesn't really know, what he's doing? Like, all of that stuff kind of plays in, and all of it, a guy getting into a call, that, like you said, is longer and may, restrict its capabilities, who's trying to do more advanced notes, is going to struggle. And is he handicapping himself by not challenging himself with a different style of call, and kind of, the whole riddle that goes into that, if that makes any sense at all?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Well, I'll answer your first question first about the hands. The general rule in hands is that whenever you squeeze down your hand to muffle the sound, you have to take air away too. Otherwise, the call will get trapped. It will bog down. So if you're trying to make a deeper, quieter goose, you take away air and close your hand. Now, if you're trying to make a higher pitch goose and a more of a crack, and you're opening your hand, you add air. One thing about hands and the manipulation of it, and to your point in the question, is that a lot of guys don't know what they're doing when they move their hands, is that your sound that you're trying to make by presenting the air into the call also has to work in sequence with your hand. So everything's working together. So I'm making a basic cluck, and then I'm going to go to a softer, deeper, more mellow cluck. So I'm going to close down my hand in a split second, and I'm also going to add in the air, a little bit thinner, a little bit more gently, a little bit slower and quieter. And then I'm going to go to a high pitch goose, so I'm going to add in the air more intensely from my diaphragm. I'm going to push a little bit harder, make it sound like more of a crack, and I'm going to open my hands up and kind of pull the sound out of the goose call with my hands by opening them up. So it's a give and take process, not only with your hands, but how you present the air into the call. So you're going to take air away, you're going to close your hands down, you're going to add air and open your hands up to get those variations. Now, what is a goose call, design when you look at them? Because you're right, there's a lot of goose calls out there. How do I find the one that's built best for me? And we get to answer this question multiple times a day in emails or phone calls or right here in this setting. Anytime you lengthen a short reed goose call, it's going to become easier to blow because the call has more material, has more bore length. It's working for you. That's why flutes were so easy and still are so easy to blow because they're longer. The call is producing the sound in the call for you. Now, when you're starting to shorten that goose call up, that's when they become more difficult. You have to control the air a little bit more because the sound is getting to the reed faster and it's getting out of the call faster. So anytime you shorten the goose call up, you're going to have to be more of an advanced caller to run that goose call because it's going to take more control, more pressure, more manipulation on your end to get the different tones out of it, but the capabilities also go up. So the longer the goose call is, the fewer the capabilities, the shorter the goose call is, the more capabilities. But the longer the goose call, the easier, more efficient it is. The shorter the goose call, the more difficult it is. Generally speaking, when you look at a goose call, there's two parts of it. There's the barrel, which is the mouthpiece, and then there's the insert, which is what you put your hands on. So if the barrel is at a longer length, it's going to be a little bit easier running. If the barrel is shorter, that air is going to get onto that reed very, very quickly. So it's going to have a faster response for it. So that means you're going to have to put the air in more correctly right off the bat with a longer barrel. Insert, same thing. Longer the insert, more easier it is to control. Shorter the insert, more harder it is to control. And then you start to look at the insides of a goose call. How is a call bored out? A lot of people just run a 5/8 inch bore all the way through their goose call. Personally, with ours, we've worked with the boring a little bit differently, so it has flows in it and it opens up, it traps down. And then you look at the gut. The big thing is today is worn-in guts versus just a standard goose set of guts. What does that mean? When you put air into a goose call, that reed that's in there is going to vibrate 100 miles an hour up and down. Well, if you have a new set of guts and you use that goose call for a long time, eventually that reed is going to wear grooves into that gut system. Well, now the thing is that we take those guts that are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old and we mold them so the consumer is getting a worn-in set of guts right off the bat. What does that mean for the guy that buys that call? That means you're getting a goose call that is capable of doing more things. The longer the reed travel is up and down, the more capabilities that tone channel has in it. You know, when a fresh set of guts that hasn't been used, that reed travel is maybe a quarter of an inch, little over. When you start to wear in a good set of guts and add power into it, now you're talking about a reed travel of a half an inch, and that makes a world of difference. So you're taking that harsh, high-pitched tone out of that goose call and allowing that reed to travel below the surface of that tone board to get that deeper, hollower tone that a goose has. So worn-in guts are very, very efficient. They're going to give you naturally a better tone right off the bat, and they're going to allow more capabilities right off the bat, too. So, and when it comes to a full reed versus a shaved reed, that's personal preference for a lot of guys. A shaved reed is going to have a little more flex, so it's going to allow a little bit more range. A full reed, and when I mean full reed, that doesn't mean taking any of the material, shaving any of the material off the top of the reed. That's going to have a little bit more power on it, too. So those are kind of, I guess, the breakdowns of, length, bore, gut, reed, overall of a goose call. And when you start to add in those things as a call manufacturer, when you go to make a goose call, you try to think, how can I add a couple percent to this? How can I get that air to that reed just a hair fraction easier and smoother? How can I trap that air down on the back end to increase the back pressure in the goose call where the caller doesn't have to make it? And then you look at your reeds. How can we stamp these out so they map better into the tone board? When you do all those little tiny things, you take 2% here, 3% here, 3% here, all of a sudden they add up, hopefully to a 10% better goose call than the next guy. And that's kind of the gist of goose calls and making goose calls.
So how is the gut system looking in that call that you've had on for 5 years? Because that is a lot of calling.
They're looking pretty good. One thing about it is that when you have a set of guts, back in the day, a lot of people used the clucker gut, that Nightingale back in the, yep. I think they came out with the double cluck plus or the Magnum clucker back in 88, 89 or something like that. And those are still the same guts that a lot of call manufacturers use today. We manufactured ours a little bit differently, a little more shallow of a trough, took off some of the front end material. But one thing about a gut system is that probably the length of a set of guts, I would say, is about 8 or 9 years. Okay, and that's start to finish. Anytime you extend past that, you start to lose air, bubble reads out very fast, it gets very, very heavy and hard to control, and you have to do a lot more air. So when we personally made the guts that go into our calls, we took a set of 3-year-old guts that we had worn in and molded them off of there, because we think the best lifespan of a set of guts is about 2 to 2.5 years old to about 6 years old. That is kind of where we feel the max capability is on a set of guts. So you lose about 10% when you mold something. So we took about a 3-year-old set of guts and molded it back to about a 2.5-year-old set of guts, theoretically speaking. So a guy's getting it right at the start of the max lifespan of those guts, or what we feel is the gut life and the best performance of those. So definitely a huge advantage to get a set of worn guts right off the bat. Can allow you to sound like the tone of a goose more capabilities down the road too. So yeah, but the ones personally in my call, they're getting very, very they're getting very, very heavy. I'll say that, but that's okay. They got a lot of power, and we like a lot of power when we're out hunting.
Man, and that's still the same reed you said too. Is that normal, or do you usually go through?
Yeah, actually, the 2 calls that are hanging on my lanyard is a White X series, which has my original clucker guts in from, let's see, the first short reed goose call I had was that mag, or one of the first ones was that, I think it was the double cluck plus, or maybe it was the Magnum clucker from Nightingale. They're still the original guts, and the reed I have in it was the reed from 2005 that I won all 3 World Live titles on and still hunt with today. Now, it's chipped, it's bubbled, but it sounds unbelievable. A lot of guys think, when they start to see a little tiny bubble, or, the reed has been in the call for a year, they're like, well, put a fresh reed in. It's like, no, that's the last thing you want. That reed is getting a lot of flexibility. It's almost like it's becoming conditioned or has muscle memory to what it's trying to do. So both of the reeds in my calls are 13 years old and 6 years old. Wow.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Wow. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit. Earlier in the show, you talked about, the 3 sounds, that the guys got to get down, cluck, moan, honk. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I took away from Bad Grammar that legitimately, and I'm not BSing you here when I say this, changed my life, was, when I was brought up hunting, waterfowl, it was like, all right, birds are coming, you're working them. Like when they're set up and they're coming to your spread, you shut up
You
and
go quiet.
you let them
Yep.
come. And
Sure.
and that's what I always did. And I had the DVD through the summer and I was watching it, and I saw you talk about this topic, and I was like, man, that this makes sense what you're saying, but I've just never done that. And
Mhm.
the first time I ever tried it, I was actually with Dan hunting up in Pennsylvania early season, and we had birds coming in, and I was like, when they were starting to come, but they were just kind of short stopping us a little bit. They were still in range, but they were
Sure.
just a little bit out. So I hammered them right as their feet were about to touch the ground, and sure enough, man, they pick up and they settle another like
They flew into
7-8,
you.
pulled 7-8 yards right up into the hole,
Yep.
and we hammered them. And like from that point forward, I hit almost every flock with that. And I think that that's just something that kind of like we were talking about, some of the fundamental techniques. It's just one of those things where, whether it's turkey hunting or you're goose calling or something, it's like, hey, if they're coming, don't mess with it. But, you're the way you presented it, and that, the competition for food and the geese on the ground are saying, back off, this is my spot. Like you're not welcome here kind of thing. That makes complete sense. Talk a little bit about just kind of your philosophies on those three sounds, and I know this is probably one question that could be an hour conversation on its own, but kind of high level so that people get a feel for why these sounds are so important, other than the fact that everything builds off them. But when the geese are talking to each other and what they're saying with these sounds has a ton of value. And you talk about guys, incrementally increasing their success, whether it's through the way the call's built or the way you use the call. For me, this one was incrementally more successful in my hunting because I was able to get birds closer, more guys were able to shoot, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So talk a little bit about that for just a few minutes, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this goes back to, an earlier question is how much making Bad Grammar, the CD and DVD helped me. Because I got to witness these things and how geese communicate with geese. So when we made Bad Grammar, the CD, I had 30 hours of live audio of just geese making sounds. And we made Bad Grammar, the DVD, I had to go out and record geese physically doing each sound. So you get to see the body language and the emotion and the intensity that certain sounds mean when they're communicating with other geese. And that's really where the name Bad Grammar came up to, is because when geese really get mad, they get agitated, they mean business, their sounds that they make are almost slurs because of the intensity. They're talking that it's grammar, and then they put the bad in the front of it, basically. So when you look at geese, out in the field, and this came from watching them, videotaping them, recording them, is that when they are out in the field, and the hunting season is during the migration. Okay, when September 1st hits and crops start to get picked, and the wind switches from the north, and those long full moons start to come in September, geese have one thing on their mind. That's to survive. That's food. That's to migrate. That's to guide safely through, hunting pressure, but also to get to areas with food location. So it's kind of like the spring, but in reverse. In the spring, they're battling for nesting territory. Well, in the fall, they're battling for food rights. And anytime food becomes the animal's number one factor, which it is in so many animals because the weather is turning for the worst, that is the number one thing on their mind. So when they're communicating, specifically out in the field, because that's where we're hunting them, right? So when they're out in a field and they start communicating with other geese, they're not just doing it for the joy of talking. A goose will never say anything. He's perfectly content and happy and in a park and resting, and no dogs are around, no people's around. They're dead quiet, okay? When a goose is communicating and making sounds, something's going on. And in the fall, what's going on is food rights, is territory rights. And so when you see these birds out in the field in the fall and competition for food is at a must, there'll always be a pecking order, a dominant pecking order out in that food. You'll see, you can watch that same dominant goose just run off family group after family group, where they put their heads down to the ground, they run across the field, they shake that tail. The sounds they make during that are hair raising. They're very, very aggressive. So when it comes to geese fishing other geese or calling geese at the end moment, that last 60 to 100 yards, naturally what geese do is when those geese lock up and they get to 60, 70 yards and those geese in the air, they start going, and they're coming down into those geese on the ground. You will see heads rise up. Sometimes one, sometimes 20 of them. They're going to rise up and they're going to start going ballistic to those geese in the air. And as soon as they hit the ground, it's almost like a battle for territory. As soon as they hit the ground, there's going to be a family dispute. And so what geese do is they naturally communicate and finish other geese a lot more vocally than they do any other time of the year. In the spring, you'll see it on nesting sites or whatnot. But when that weather starts to change, and the worse the weather they get, the more they do it. And so naturally speaking, a goose will start getting more vocal. He'll start picking up his intensity. He'll start picking up his inflection into the sound the closer those geese get in the air. So as a hunter, as I was watching this and observing this while making that grammar, it only makes perfect sense. Like I said, back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, it was more being on the spot. They're coming to you, don't screw it up. Now, because of the hunting pressure, because decoys have gotten better, tactics has gotten better, concealment has gotten better, strategy in your decoy spread has gotten better, calling has too. And this is one thing that a lot of people do, and they keep those birds not only excited, fixed in on what's going on the ground, it sounds real to them, because you got to remember, a goose lands with another goose every single day of his life. They know how those geese communicate. They're used to it. And when they're coming into a decoy spread and all of a sudden it becomes quiet, that's a red flag, because live geese on the ground, that's not how they act. They get really, really aggressive. So when we circle back to the beginning of this conversation is, I learned as much off of it as I hope everybody else did. This is one of the things that I really picked up on. And it's also one thing that I would say has significantly, very, very significantly helped our hunting in positioning geese for a shot, probably more so than anything else over the last, 10 to 13 years or so. So, yes, that's very important. And a lot of guys, they do back off because they might read that in a magazine, up in Canada it worked, 2 weeks ago it worked. But like I said, anything in waterfowl hunting works once every 2 weeks, but day in and day out, to finish geese, you're probably going to have to get a lot more aggressive. And it also comes with confidence. Have the confidence to do it. Have the confidence to try it. And once you do it once and you see it work, you will be sold on that. But a lot of guys, they're afraid of screwing up that flock of geese and not getting a shot at them, so they go quiet. And that just makes the goose come in slower, makes them think more, makes them check out things more. The more aggressive you are, the faster they come in, and the more lifelike it sounds to them.
Yeah, and that's something I get to watch off my front porch come usually mid-August before we get into hunting season, but the farmer always cuts the field across from my house, and I'll sit on the front porch and watch them and just watch the family groups. And you, like you said, man, there's always that one Billy Bad, and running people off, and they definitely act like that and get very protective. So that's really cool. And we've been on over an hour, and I think we want to break the ice a little bit about a big project that you've been a part of lately, and will be coming out. This show's coming out on a Monday, and August 1st, you have a big release coming out that I really think is going to be a game changer to anyone that hunts and calls. So maybe give us a little insight on what you've been working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing it up. We are coming out with Bad Grammar Academy. And what this is, 13 years ago now, or 12 years ago now, they came out with Bad Grammar, the CD, CD player. Everybody had them in the cars, listening to them. A few years after that, in 08, we came out with Bad Grammar, the DVD. You put it in your DVD, you watch it on TV. Well, the times have changed. They no longer put disk drives in laptops. Personally, I don't even know if I have a DVD player, to be honest with you. So what we're doing is we're coming out with Bad Grammar, the Academy, for a mobile application. You can watch it on your iPad. You can watch it on your cell phone, because nowadays people are short on time and it makes it hard to practice. Well, it makes it even harder to practice if you have to have a DVD player or a TV in a house, because that's usually where people's families are. You're annoyed, you're loud, whatever. Sometimes people go to a gravel road on their way to work. This gives people a chance to practice and hopefully learn whenever they find time and wherever that might be. It's right in the palm of your hand. It's going to be a lifelong membership that people can purchase. You get goose calling on there. You get duck calling on it right off the bat. We're going to add in, more sounds, team calling, contest calling. We'll probably do some spec stuff. But this is going to be Bad Grammar, the Academy, in a mobile application, so you can have it with you wherever you are and whenever you find that time. And it's keeping up with the times is basically, what it is. We understand that, people have busy lives. They have kids. They have, games to attend. They have this and that. And finding a place and finding time to practice is very, very challenging. So hopefully this academy makes it easier for them, because we, as we stated earlier, what we feel how important calling is to the sport of being successful in waterfowl hunting. We hope this is going to help people be able to practice easier. And that is going to be right at their fingertips whenever they find that time. So it's an adventure that we're working on with Barton Ramsey from Southern Oak Kennels. He has the Cornerstone Dog Academy, and so we're doing the Bad Grammar Calling Academy. And that will be released next Wednesday, and we're super excited about that because, again, we get to hopefully help out people in their busy lives by making it more accessible and easier to practice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about this idea because, as we were talking earlier, you've got people coming into the sport that, we see it in our Facebook group all the time. Guys just like I was, didn't have someone that they hunted with a lot. So they're finding their way, on their own, or maybe with one other buddy who's got a similar interest, but he might not have any experience either. So there's guys out there trying to figure it out. And, right now they can go somewhere on YouTube or something and find a really old version of some sort of calling instruction, or, they can go to Bad Grammar but like you said, they might not have a CD player to play it or a DVD player, whatever. But what I love about these academies is it gives the flexibility to continue to evolve and build the program. And, as new techniques come out and different philosophies and things like that, so it's a continual learning experience. And it's one of those things where, you're not limited by, well, we got to get it into like an hour because no one's going to sit in front of the DVD player for more than an hour. And it's like, it's got these, it's got these modules and it's self-paced, and you do your speed, and, when you're comfortable, you move on. And like you said, you can do it anywhere. And I think that really is indicative of the times and sort of the direction that it's going. And I'm really excited because I tell you, I took a lot away from the Bad Grammar DVD, and even today, I've owned it for, I can't tell you how long I've owned it, but when I go back and watch it periodically, there's still things that like you can pick up. And, I was going to ask you this question, but I think it's a good point to bring up here. And you can give me your thoughts on this. One of the reasons why I love the Bad Grammar CD is because, as a caller, I consider myself to be an average caller, right? I can cluck, moan, honk, I can kill geese, I can, do
Sure.
some stuff, but I'm not a
Yep.
stage guy. And I think part of the problem is, I said earlier on, for me it was that on ramping, like getting started was hard. And then once I got the basics, I could make all the other sounds pretty quickly. But then you reach that level where you're trying to be advanced, and I hit that wall again. And I think part of that is because I don't personally hunt with or any spend a lot of time around other guys that are trying to push themselves and calling to that
Mm-hmm.
level. Everybody I kind of hunt with is just good. We're just good. None of us are great. None of us are
Sure.
terrible. We're just good. But when I'm trying to better myself, I'll put on bad grammar and I'll try to compete with you and hear you make good sounds, because it's like it never fails. I go on a guided hunt and I hear the guide run the call. I'll go back to my truck and I immediately sound better because I've heard somebody else doing it. And it's like you pick up stuff, just being around other good callers. And, for
Yep.
guys that want to try to get feedback, it's like, hey, pull out your phone, watch this module, mimic that.
Yep.
Do you sound like that
Sure.
or no? Because I don't know what your opinion on that is, but I feel like if you don't hear people that are better than you calling, for me, I kind of stall out in my development and my growth as a caller.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think that case can be made in a lot of different aspects of life. Let's take goose calling. You look at goose calling and you look at the areas of the country that have a lot of world champions from them, or a lot of really great goose callers from them. They pretty much come from kind of the same little areas, around Eastern Maryland, Southern Illinois. Minnesota has a bunch of them. Chicago is because they're around other great goose callers, and that pushes you to become better. If you're from, I hate to say it, but nowhere, Utah, you probably don't have a lot of guys around you that are maybe better than you, or even at your same level. So, hey, you might think, this is as good as it gets or whatnot. But when you're in those areas with a lot of rich goose hunting, and in particular calling history, and you have world champions that are in your area, and successful contest callers, that's what pushes you to become better. Because when you look at it, if you look at the world championship titles over the last 40 years or whatever it is, you can probably draw a map, a 40-mile radius around Southern Illinois, Chicago, Eastern Maryland, and what have you. And it's because, one, there was a really good goose caller to start there, and then everybody else tries, to pick their game up and elevate it to that same level. So yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it'll be a way that I wouldn't say to necessarily see what level you're at, but hopefully to take you to the level where you want to be at. And I think there's a statistic out there where something like 40% of the people in this country spend their lunch break in their car. Well, I don't think you have a TV and a DVD player in your car. Some people may, but hey, it could be right there on the phone. You can practice on your lunch break and maybe get better and take you to that level that is going to help you out the field too. But I definitely think there is definitely truth to your question about being in an area with other goose callers that are very, very good. That's going to push you to another level, and hopefully this academy makes it easier for people to take their calling to another level by being able to practice wherever they are.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And when I first heard about this, I immediately just thought it's going to be a home run for you guys. There's a huge market, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. So, I appreciate the work that you guys put into it. And is it, we do have a lot of fans of Barton and Southern Oak Kennels and Cornerstone and everything that they have put together. So is this going to be the same format as Cornerstone on your laptop and whatnot, like different modules? You break it down per call, or how do you guys have that set up?
Yeah, it's going to be, basically what it is it's bad grammar in an academy for your phone. So we're going to start out by taking you through the fundamentals. How to hold the call, put the call up to your mouth, tongue position, airflow. We're going to talk about inflection, building feet. We're going to talk about all the notes, the honk, the cluck, the moan, the double cluck, the sit note, the train, and what have you. And basically, if it's not a continuously run video, you can swipe through it, through the logs of videos and click on the one that you're working on. So you can go right to it, click on it, and, on your lunch break or wherever have you want to work on the double cluck, just go into the Academy on your mobile app and or your mobile phone, go to that one and click on it, and boom, there you have it. And the same as for the duck as well. And like you mentioned earlier, the version that's coming out right away won't be the end of it. We'll continually add new stuff to it. It'll just be a new video that comes into your Academy. Whether that be team calling stuff, whether that would be contest stuff, whether that would be just useful tips, a new sound, a new technique, something to work on, and what have you, or calling out in the field, reading geese. So it's not an end all right away. We'll be continually adding on this over the years, but yeah, it'll be Academy like Cornerstone, where if you're working on something with your dog, a specific technique, you can flip through and go right to it and just click on it, and there it is, and it's broken down like bad grammar with the chapters in it, so you can go front to back to front, wherever you want, however you want to go through it, but it will have the fundamentals and everything in between and the sound. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it, and we know, like I said earlier, how important calling is, because the success it gave us out in the field, the enjoyment, the interaction with the goose, getting that goose to do something that he's not necessarily wanting or was expecting to do on that particular day. That is really a huge part of each hunt, we feel, and the enjoyment of creating, a lifetime waterfowl hunter, is be able to feel that, being able to see that reaction. And we hope that everybody can become an efficient, good, great goose caller to see those results work out in the field, because that's what keeps people in the sport, keeps people going. And if we can help out by giving them a few techniques to get there, then we're all for it. Because if it can help out your days of field, then that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no question. That's one of my favorite things about waterfowl hunting, and it's similar to turkey hunting in the sense that I love interacting with the game I'm pursuing, and getting that dialogue back and forth, and seeing them to react to something that I'm doing is a thrill, and it's one of the main reasons I love to hunt geese. And again, I'm really fired up about the Bad Grammar Academy. I'm excited to see it come out August 1st. Definitely encouraging everyone to check that out. And we're looking forward to that. I know, a ton of work goes into getting, high quality content put together. So, obviously working with Barton and, the Cornerstone team, obviously, I think you guys will probably have something awesome on your hands here. So we're super excited. And, I'll say, man, we've kept you longer than we said we would, but I could do this all night, but, we're going to let you go. We definitely appreciate your time. We're super excited to get, the Bad Grammar Academy out, on the 1st, and checking that out. And, just thanks again for the time. And, we appreciate you stopping by the show.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime you want to do it again. I really enjoyed it too. I love talking waterfowl hunting, goose calling. I absolutely love it. Obviously, I've based my livelihood around it, so it's fascinating to me. Hopefully, it is to a lot of other people too. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have me on here. And it was fun.
Absolutely.
Glad to be on.
Yep, we had a blast as well. Thanks again for stopping by. And everyone, we encourage you, August 1st, check it out. Bad Grammar Academy. Thanks again, Scott.
You bet, guys.
All right, Dan. I think, that was one of more enjoyable interviews for me. I think, when you're talking to somebody that's super passionate about what they do, and it's easy to be, caught up kind of in the conversation. And that was like the quickest hour and whatever it was, for me. And I think I literally could have kept going for a while, but, I'm excited about the Academy coming out, and looking forward to seeing what that brings. And, that's just kind of the next chapter. And looking forward to having Scott back in the season and hearing, a little bit more about, some advanced hunting type stuff with him. And, the guy's a wealth of knowledge and is really passionate about it, and is very knowledgeable about not just goose calling, but goose hunting. And hopefully we'll be able to get him back on and have some more in-depth discussions about hunting.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do that, because he was, he's laying down some tips for us just at the end, after we recorded, and just little things that you pick up over time that, like he was saying, it turns into, just time after time after time, these little things that you pick up, and it could change the way that you hunt. So that'll be advanced tactics, via him. But you know what got me thinking, you always talk about or ask people, what was a product that really changed waterfowl hunting, and the way he was explaining calling and really how important it is today than what it used to be. This product, this Bad Grammar Academy, I think is going to be one of those products that change the game for a lot of people. And to have that on your phone, be able to, make yourself that much better of a caller and confident out in the field when you get out there, it's going to change. It's going to change a lot of hunts. There's going to be a lot more birds down on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like I said in the interview, there's some techniques that I took away from it that absolutely contributed to more birds being harvested. So, super excited, and only a couple days away. It's going to be available. So definitely encourage everybody to check it out. And I'm looking forward to having them back on again and talking more in-depth hunting type tech tips and techniques and things like that. And I think it's going to be good.
Yes, sir. That was a great show. Great show. I loved it.
Yep. What else you got here before we go ahead and wrap this one up?
This was 93. So, I mean, we're getting closer and closer to number 100. Things are lining up. We're breaking our own daily, monthly, yearly download records. So, we appreciate all the support, all the shares, all the love, all the comments we get, all the questions. Like, it's fun to be on this end of it. And, seeing those numbers explode like they have been is just really cool on our end. And, I remember sitting in the same spot from when we started this and just wondering, if we were going to break 50 or 100 downloads, and now we're, thousands on a day. So it's super cool. And we really appreciate all our listeners. So that's about all I got. It's not a Thanksgiving episode, but I'm feeling pretty thankful today.
Well, and to that end, we've really tried to start doing more giveaways and things like that is to show our thanks. So if you're not in our Facebook listeners group, head over there and get in, because we do a lot of our giveaways through that. So usually all you got to do is share the episode, and you're entered, and just we'll go live on Sunday evenings or something like that, and we'll give away some gear or whatever we've given them. We've done giveaways for a Sitka jacket. We give away hats. All kinds of stuff. So we're going to try to keep that up. So we appreciate the support. And if you're missing out on those giveaways, definitely head over there and get in, so we can get you set up and get you a chance to win. So I think that's probably good for this week, Dan. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, unless you got something else you want to add.
No more things. I'm good.
Roger that. Before we close out the show, I want to take a moment to thank Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy, Gunner Kennels, Adrenaline, Camp Chef, Black Rifle Coffee Company, and Southern Oak Kennels for their support of the show. Thank you to all of them, and please support them in any way you can. All right, that's going to do it for episode 93 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. Thanks to Scott Threinen for coming on and spending some time with us. Definitely check out the Bad Grammar Academy, and check out all of the past episodes of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast on iTunes. Leave a 5-star rating and review while you're there. We certainly appreciate that. head over to the listeners group, get in there and get involved in our giveaways. That's our thank you to you for all the support of this show. That's all we got for you this week. Till next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.